You were never meant to hear this. Not in school, not in church, not even in whispers over wine, because some truths are locked behind marble doors, buried in state-sealed vaults, and soaked in centuries of shame. And this one begins with a corpse, a royal corpse, cold, stiff, and still carrying the most grotesque secret in European history. Ferdinand VII, King of Spain, dead in 1833, lies naked on silk sheets in the royal palace. But it isn't his crown that has Madrid's corridors trembling, it's what lies beneath his waist. A deformity so extreme, so unnatural, that the priest won't speak of it, the doctors dare not document it, and the Queen, she wants it preserved. She stands at the edge of the bed, eyes swollen from weeping, voice trembling. Maria Cristina, Queen Regent of Spain. She issues an order you can't quite comprehend. She wants you to embalm it, not the body, the grotesque, misshapen member of the king. The thing whispered about by nobles and mocked by foreign diplomats. The anatomical monstrosity that shaped an entire reign, politically, sexually, psychologically. You try to protest, but her eyes don't blink, because this isn't just preservation, it's containment, it's power. As your trembling hands lift the silk, you feel it, the weight, the impossible shape, longer than reason, wider at the end than at the base, curved like a blacksmith's tool. It defies medicine, defies biology. It is grotesque, like a punishment passed down through generations of inbreeding. But more than flesh, it is a relic of power twisted by shame. Because Ferdinand VII wasn't just a king, he was a monster made by monarchs. The final product of a bloodline that married power to perversion and crowned deformity as destiny. They say monsters are made, but Ferdinand VII wasn't made, he was bred. Not by sorcery or sin, but by centuries of incestuous design. His bloodline, twisted beyond recognition, was the legacy of kings who believed that power was purity and that marrying your cousin made the crown stronger. The result? A man who came into this world already broken, his body deformed, his mind damaged, his fate sealed. October 14th, 1784, El Escorial Palace echoed with hollow joy as Ferdinand entered the world, the child of Charles IV and Maria Luisa of Parma, first cousins bound not by love but by dynastic strategy. Doctors said he was healthy, but the midwives whispered about the crooked limbs, the swollen features, the unusual silence in his cries. They knew what court physicians wouldn't say aloud. The rot was already inside him. By age 8, Ferdinand's tutors had seen enough. He couldn't focus. He flew into rages. He muttered to himself when he thought no one was watching. But worse, he had begun to notice his body wasn't like the others. In the royal baths, servants whispered. Nobles turned away, disturbed. The whispers weren't about strength or virility, they were about shape. Something was wrong. Something unnatural. This was no ordinary deformity, not just a large organ, but a bizarre one, misshapen, mutated. Vatican archived physicians' notes later described it as alien in proportion, thin at the base, thick as a fist at the tip. So long it was said he could tap it against his own knee. And it grew. Not just with age, but with emotion, rage, shame, power. A serpent that awakened with his mood. Ferdinand didn't inherit a weapon, he inherited a curse, a symbol of royal decay made flesh. Every boy is shaped by how the world sees him. But when the world looks at you with pity, or worse, amusement, something breaks, and for Ferdinand, that fracture became a crack in the throne itself. At court, behind velvet drapes and perfumed courtiers, the whispers never stopped. Foreign envoys laughed in coded language. Ladies in waiting giggled behind gloved hands. Even the palace dogs, he would later say, were trained to mock him. He wasn't just mocked for his deformity, he was reduced to it. A walking punchline, a crown with no dignity, a boy king with a body made for shame. They called him El Deseado, the desired one, in public. But in private they called him El Monstruo Real, the royal freak. And Ferdinand heard everything. He developed ears trained for betrayal, eyes that scanned faces for laughter, a soul that trusted no one. His tutors noticed the change first. The boy who once asked questions now made demands. Servants were dismissed for looking too long. A page caught giggling outside his chamber was found flogged and exiled. The message was clear. No one could witness his shame and live to speak of it. As puberty hit, the deformity grew. So did his rage. Physicians were summoned in secret. They used clinical words: swelling, irregular growth, abnormal curvature. But no medicine could fix it. Only control could ease the pain. So Ferdinand learned to dominate, not with strength but fear. He started practicing his future power by ordering servants to perform humiliating tasks. He ordered one to clean his chamber floors with her wedding veil, another to polish his boots while whispering praises to his divine gift. These were not commands, they were tests, and Spain would become the final test. The pain of mockery had mutated into cruelty without boundaries. Where others saw a deformity, Ferdinand saw a weapon, a punishment, an excuse, ever. The humiliation he suffered as a boy, he would now inflict tenfold on everyone around him, especially women, especially wives. Because the world had laughed at his body, and now his body would become a tool for domination. Not love, not passion, only revenge. There are wedding nights, and then there are royal executions in disguise. Maria Antonia of Naples arrived in Madrid with lace dreams and candlelit fantasies. She was young, innocent, the daughter of a royal house raised on courtly romance and religious chastity. She believed she was marrying Spain's future. She had no idea she was stepping into a trap of flesh and fear. The palace glowed with celebration, trumpets, fireworks, golden veils. But in the bridal suite, servants moved like silent ghosts, carrying strange tools, pillows of abnormal shapes, bottles of thick oils, medical kits disguised as perfume boxes. No one dared speak, because everyone knew what she was about to see. When Ferdinand entered, he did not smile. He disrobed with mechanical coldness, and when she saw him, saw it, her scream was instant and blood-curdling, the kind of scream that doesn't ask for help, it begs for escape. Her maids rushed in, thinking she'd seen a ghost. She had. One wearing her husband's skin, she pointed, screamed, "Monster! Monster!" She clawed the wall until her fingers bled. But there was no escape. This was marriage. This was monarchy. And she was now the property of a man who terrified her more than death. The king's physicians were summoned not to heal her, but to make the act possible. They explained like emotionless surgeons what had to be done, how the pillows would position her to avoid injury, how the oils must be applied in a precise rhythm, how she would need laudanum to survive it, not physically, psychologically, because Ferdinand didn't want a wife, he wanted a ritual, a witness, a victim, and Spain needed an heir. Even if it meant breaking the Queen's mind and body night after night, until her womb surrendered or her spirit died. From that night on, Maria Antonia was never the same. She began walking the palace halls like a ghost in silk. She spoke little, prayed constantly, and each time Ferdinand summoned her to the chamber, the maids would lace her with narcotics like lamb to slaughter. Her body bore no bruises, but her mind? It cracked like porcelain under pressure. The doctor said she was frail, but the truth? She was being sacrificed night after night to a king who turned shame into power and made sex into a national curse. Spain watched and waited for the bump, for the child, for the heir that would legitimize the nightmare behind palace walls. But there was no bump, no joy, only silence, grief, and the sound of a queen praying to a god who had gone deaf. Maria Antonia did conceive, twice, and twice her womb betrayed her. The first miscarriage came in the 4th month. Blood soaked the royal bed. The second, almost full term. A stillborn child with fingers already formed, lips purple, and a crown-shaped birthmark across its forehead, an omen no one dared interpret. Ferdinand's reaction wasn't grief, it was rage. He accused her of sabotage, claimed she was moving too much, reading liberal literature, worshipping in secret. Whispers slithered through the palace that she was cursed, that she didn't want to give Spain a Catholic heir, that her womb rejected Ferdinand not because of divine punishment, but because it recognized the monstrosity of what had entered it. Maria Antonia believed it. She spiraled. More laudanum, more priests, more confessions for sins she never committed. Ferdinand wasn't done. He ordered astrologers to chart their sex by lunar cycles, alchemists to mix fertility salves with crushed pearls and bat blood. He had his royal craftsmen forge new restraints, designed to hold the queen in place, to prevent her from resisting or recoiling. Not out of cruelty, he insisted, out of duty. If she wouldn't embrace her role, she would be engineered into it. Her chamber became a laboratory of trauma. Ferdinand's seed wasn't just physical, it was political. And her failure to carry it became a national disgrace. Maria Antonia's final months were a slow death. She stopped eating, stopped smiling, started whispering to paintings. She confessed to poisoning herself, though no poison was ever found. In 1807, she died, officially, fever and weakness. But the palace maids knew better. She died of something no doctor could cure, being married to Ferdinand VII, and days later, the royal apothecary was found dead, poisoned. A suicide note vanished into Ferdinand's hands, never seen again. Some say the note contained the truth, not just about Maria's death, but about what really grew beneath the king's robes. Maria Antonia was buried with royal honors, but her death unlocked something feral in Ferdinand. He didn't mourn, he celebrated. Within months, he remarried twice, each time younger, each time more fearful. He didn't choose wives for love or alliance, he chose them for obedience. And Spain began to whisper in dread, because this wasn't just a king with power, this was a king with a mind unraveling. Ferdinand no longer trusted anyone. He believed his ministers were plotting against him, that the Pope sent coded messages in sacred hymns, that his own seed was being stolen by foreign spies. He ordered court guards to watch his bedroom door at night, not to protect him, but to ensure no one tampered with the fluids left on his linens. Paranoia wrapped itself around him like a second robe, and he began rewriting laws not to govern Spain, but to control his wives. One queen was forbidden from leaving her room without 2 guards. Another was ordered to sleep on glass beads to stimulate fertility. A maid caught glancing at Ferdinand's robe was blinded in one eye. Officially, an accident. Unofficially, a warning. His deformity had become legend now. Courtiers speculated it wasn't a body part, but a divine punishment. That God had made him monstrous to punish Spain for its sins. But no one dared speak aloud what they all knew. This wasn't a reign, this was a hostage crisis. And then came the royal edict. Ferdinand decreed that if he died without a male heir, no woman could inherit his crown. He would rather see Spain plunged into civil war than ruled by a queen. Because the idea of a woman holding power disgusted him, confused him, frightened him. His own broken masculinity wouldn't allow it. He was the product of inbreeding, trauma, and divine right, and he would make Spain bleed before letting it forget that Ferdinand VII died on September 29, 1833, not in a blaze of glory, but in a pool of his own madness and bile. His final days were agony, his swollen body convulsing with fever, his breath rasping like torn parchment. They say he screamed names of dead wives. They say he begged God to take back the curse. But no priest could offer comfort, because what haunted Ferdinand wasn't hell. It was what would be discovered when his body was opened. Custom ordered physicians, under strict royal secrecy, were brought in for embalming, but the moment they uncovered his lower body, they froze. Even they, men trained to see the worst of plague and war, couldn't speak. One vomited, another fainted. What they found wasn't just a large appendage. It was a mutated column of flesh, veined like marble, heavy and permanently engorged, even in death. It stretched nearly to the knees, wider at the tip than any human anatomy could explain. It pulsed, they said, as if it remembered. Rumors exploded that it wasn't human, that it had been grafted in secret by dark surgeons, that it was the final proof of Habsburg degeneration, a symbol of a bloodline so warped it could no longer produce men, only monsters. The Vatican ordered the body sealed in 3 coffins. No autopsy, no sketches, no relics, just silence, and a warning to future kings. Spain moved on. It had no choice. But Ferdinand's legacy remained like a stain on royal silk. A king remembered not for war or law, but for a body that defied God, and a reign that broke women's minds and a nation itself. Some say his curse ended with him. Others say it passed on, not in blood, but in shame. And in the secret archives of royal Europe, his name is still whispered, the king who should never have been born. You'd think death would have erased him, that time would grind down his name like worn stone, but Ferdinand VII didn't just haunt his wives, he haunts Spain itself. They buried his body. But they couldn't bury what he represented, a monarchy warped by incest, a masculinity poisoned by deformity, and a faith used to sanctify violation. His descendants fought over his bones, literally. Civil wars broke out over his succession. His edict banning female heirs backfired and plunged Spain into generational conflict. His daughter, Isabella II, took the throne anyway, but under the shadow of her father's curse. She was mocked, undermined, overthrown. The public said she was too masculine, as if fate was still trying to correct his legacy with hers. In secret Vatican vaults, there are still documents sealed with Ferdinand's crest, medical files, letters, confessions, rumors of a final autopsy conducted in silence, with notes that were deemed too disturbing for history books. Some say his remains were later moved, that his body was exhumed, tested, and then hidden again, not to protect him, but to protect us. In Spain, no monument bears his full truth, no textbook explains what his wives endured, no chapel admits what happened behind royal curtains. Because Ferdinand wasn't just a king, he was a warning. And if you listen closely, in the crypt beneath El Escorial, they say you can still hear him, not breathing, not screaming, but laughing, because history never punished him. It just turned the page.